Hi, I'm Mark, and I like to talk about UK politics and Brexit from an outside view, although I do know the UK from the inside as well. In London, the new Parliament has met for the first time recently to elect the Speaker of the House of Commons. It is Lindsay Hoyle again. And more important, the Starmer government has big plans now. But first, Lindsay Hoyle has been re-elected Speaker of the British House of Commons. The Speaker of the House of Commons performs the role of, President of Parliament in the elected chamber of the British Parliament. And a record number of 335 new MPs had to find their way through the old convoluted Parliament building. The newly elected Parliament met for the first time to elect the Speaker at the time, and the government of the new Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been demonstratively rushing ahead with its plans for days. After Labour had achieved its big goal of winning the election, there was no weekend to recover. Instead, the first cabinet meeting. After all ministers had been hastily appointed, Keir Starmer held his first press conference and described the task ahead of the Labour Party as follows. It is a mandate to do politics differently. This change has already begun. And as Starmer said, as you saw, I appointed cabinet already. The ministers immediately fanned out. Foreign Secretary David Lammy travelled to some of their most important European partners, so to Berlin, Warsaw and Stockholm. And the new Defence Secretary John Healey promptly set off for Ukraine to personally deliver the British message to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Support remained as strong as ever. But back to the Parliament, Hoyle could count on being re-elected. He has the support of the Labour Party. The King then had to agree and the Speaker was sworn in. And the 650 MPs also had to take an oath on the first day. And then they started with the cabinet members, and the swearing in took about 2 days or 3 days. Introductory events followed for the new MPs, for the freshmen and fresh women, because 46% of the large Labour faction are women. And there were rules of protocol explained, as well as safety standards and how to run a member's office. And everything probably felt like the first day on school, or just without the school cone. And on July 17th, King Charles III will present the Labour government's legislative plans in the first session of Parliament in the traditional King's speech. So these are likely to include new regulations on workers' rights, transport and infrastructure policy, as well as new laws for education and the ailing healthcare system. But at the latest in the next budget in autumn, the first female finance minister or chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, will have to explain in concrete terms how all of this is to be paid for. The national debt is high, the state coffers are pretty empty, and it's questionable whether Labour can stick to its election campaign promise not to raise taxes for employees. What was a central and expensive project for the previous Tory government of Rishi Sunak was immediately put on hold by Labour, as you know. The deporting of illegal refugees to Rwanda, along with their asylum applications. The last 2 refugees still in detention were supposed to fly to Africa, and they were released at the weekend at the behest of the new Home Secretary. Many things now need to be turned on their heads, that was said by Foreign Minister Lammy. We are in a world in which the superpowers are reorganizing themselves, and that is why we need to take the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. That's what he said, and he has a slogan for this. He calls it progressive realism. It's not only this concept that he will have explained to Annalena Baerbock during his visit to Germany. He also will have explained the British desire for a new beginning in relations with Europe. But this does not mean rejoining the EU or the customs union. And the Foreign Office in Berlin wrote something on X because of that. We are examining with the new British government how the United Kingdom can move closer to the EU again. In political London, the well-wishers called Starmer a pragmatist, not a visionary, like Tony Blair back then, who achieved a huge victory against the Conservatives in 1997 as well, with his optimistic narrative about new Labour and a country that would be modern, cool and progressive under him. But times are different now. Starmer is considered a policy maker. His people call him No-Drama-Starmer. And in the early hours of the morning, when the victory in his constituency in North London was counted, he said, "The British people voted to turn the tides after 14 years, but one should not pretend that this was inevitable, because nothing in politics is predetermined. Everything is hard-earned and hard-fought, and this election could only be won by a changed Labour Party." That's probably a message to the left-wingers in this party. 4.5 years ago, Starmer took over the Labour leadership, brought the party onto a centrist course and stopped the leftward drift. Now he became the 4th Labour Prime Minister in the country's history. It was the 4th election in Britain in 9 years because of all the upheavals caused by Brexit. The Conservatives have governed for 14 years and left behind a kind of hollowed-out country. Starmer and his people are dealing with a weary country, full to the brim with people who hardly rely on politics anymore after Brexit and the scandalous Corona parties in 10 Downing Street. Many people dislike of the political class, and that has continued to grow. Voter turnout was low, with just about 58%, and the new man in Downing Street wants to change that. We said we would close the chapter, and we have started today with a mission of national renewal. We are starting to rebuild our country, is what he said. Starmer has indeed cleaned up the Labour Party since it stumbled under its previous leader Jeremy Corbyn. The latter's left-wing ideas have haunted Starmer like ghosts, which he is trying to get rid of with a centrist course. But at the same time, he is doing a political balancing act in order to win the constituencies dominated by Muslim voters in the heated atmosphere since the war in Gaza. Starmer wants to help the NHS out of its predicament, the ailing National Health Service, and there are almost 8 million patient appointments on its waiting list, also piled up by the ongoing strikes. Labour promises that 18 weeks after it took office, most will be able to start treatment. This would be achieved by working outside of normal office hours and with the help of private health providers. On the Brexit issue, the Labour Party was divided as the whole country. Starmer has avoided being specific on the emotional issue, even just talking about a possible rapprochement with the EU, but has consistently dampened hope of a speedy return to the EU. In terms of migration policy, Starmer, as I said, has already cancelled the deportations to Rwanda planned by the Tory government, and that was something expensive anyway. The so-called Rwanda plan was nevertheless expensive for taxpayers and still is. Around 400 million euros have already been transferred to the East African country, for example, for accommodation and the processing of asylum procedures. Although everyone describes Starmer as conspicuously sober, one of the biographers firmly believes that he's underestimated. He likes to tell journalists that he thinks that he would be the most apolitical politician he has ever met, and then reminds them of Angela Merkel, who was also such a case. Contrary to Starmer's reputation for being hardly emotional, you can actually see time and again in his appearances that he can get really angry. When couples with 2 incomes tell him that they can't afford a house and people tell him about their social hardships. Starmer now moved into his official residence in Downing Street. He was commissioned by Head of State King Charles III to form a government, and Starmer had already indicated that he wanted to postpone the usual political summer break a little in view of the complex problems in Great Britain. But as I said yesterday already, I will keep a close eye on what the new government will really do, like I did with the last governments. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.